Now that we've talked a little bit about patch editing, let's get into some performance editing starting with the D70's built-in effects and moving on to the MIDI out and control parameters.
Another great way to change sounds is to take full advantage of the D70's built-in digital effects. The effect settings are part of the performance data, and you can get to them by pressing the Effect Control button. The D70 has two separate signal processors, one for reverb delay and one for chorus flange effects. Any of the four tones in a patch can be sent independently to the reverb, the chorus, or they can go out dry or direct. One effective way to set things up is to use a large hall reverb and a chorus effect with the chorus routed pre-reverb. That sends the output of the chorus into the reverb, so you hear them both. Remember our layered patch B88? Let's get to it by calling up Performance D Piano plus 1, Bank 1, Number 1, then calling up patch B88. Here's a quick tip for easily routing tones to different effects. Press the Effect Control button. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see that reverb, chorus, dry, and direct are assigned to the function keys. You can instantly route any tone in your patch to any of these four destinations just by holding the appropriate Tone Zone Select button and pressing the right function key. To route tone U3 to the reverb, for example, hold down Tone Zone Select button 3 and press F1. This is a lot quicker and more interactive than going all the way into the patch edit screen and setting the output routing there. At this point, a brief explanation of the direct outputs is warranted. The direct outputs function as a dry stereo pair. In other words, if you want to use the D70's internal effects, you must use the mix outputs. However, if you wanted to add an external reverb to a tone, you would use the direct outputs. The direct outputs will not function unless you have them plugged in, even if the proper assignments are made. If the direct outputs are not plugged in, tones will default to the mix outputs. Another important part of every performance is the control assignments. By pressing the Effect Control button 3 times, you can get to the controller map screen where you can set up things like pitch bend, which has separate up and down ranges. Aftertouch and mod wheel settings, as well as assignments for the D70's control slider and pedals. Each control source, like the bend wheel or the C1 slider, can have 2 destinations. You can also route controls to the upper or lower tones, or both. When you're editing the assignments, you are affecting the controls for the part that your keyboard part is set to, which means that the controls can have different settings for each part in a performance. The parameters on this page represent the settings for the D70's internal controls. To set the external control settings, this determines what your controls send out over MIDI, press the MIDI out button twice. This screen is almost identical to the internal control screen, so you should be able to get around just fine. You can get instant access to important MIDI transmit parameters by pressing the MIDI out button. You'll notice that this screen is virtually identical to the tone display screen. The MIDI transmit parameters are organized just like tones are organized in a patch. The D70 can transmit on 4 MIDI channels, zones L1, L2, U3, and U4, and each zone has its own independent set of parameters. The Tone Zone Select buttons and the 4 tone palette sliders apply to the MIDI zones just like with the tones. You can even use 2 of the tone palette editing parameters for MIDI zones. For example, if you press Level, you can send MIDI volume commands with the appropriate slider on the active MIDI transmit channel. If you press Tuning, you can transpose the MIDI output by up to 2 octaves in either direction. You can also create the same layers, splits, and zones that you created in the tone display screen, so different parts of the keyboard can transmit over different ranges on different MIDI channels. You can even do a velocity switch between MIDI channels.
Let's sidetrack for a moment. The D70's MIDI control channel is set in the System page. You can send program changes to the D70 on this channel to switch between performances. Also, the D70 will send MIDI note data on this channel whenever you play the keyboard. This can be a problem in sequencing or in a large MIDI system. To prevent this, power up the D70 while holding number 4. You'll only have to do this once, and I recommend it for your future D70 operations. Now, back to editing.
Knowing how and when to save the edits you make is really important. Your changes are not permanent until you write them into memory. So if you've made an edit to a performance, patch, or tone, don't forget to save before you leave to work on something else. Fortunately, saving is easy because the D70 keeps track of where you're making your edits, no matter where you are in the sound architecture. You can always just press the Write button twice, followed by Enter. This tells the D70 to save all of the data associated with the level you were on when you initiated the write operation. In order to name the things you're saving, you must be in one of the official editing screens, not a quick access button. Once you've made your name, be sure to cursor to another spot before you press Write, or you'll just alter a letter. Sometimes you'll want to jump back and forth between architecture levels while editing. That's when you should use the Store All command. No matter where you are in any of the editing screens, except the quick access pages, the Store All command will let you save any edited data on all levels in one easy operation. To use Store All from any of the editing screens, just press Command, F5, F3, Command, and Enter. This saves everything, from the performance you are working with, right on down to the patch and tone parameters on Part 1. Here are a couple of tips. First of all, remember that you don't always have to overwrite the location that you're working in. If you want to save to an alternate or blank location, just rotate the value dial to find the new spot. Also, it's easy to forget about the Memory Protect switch on the D70's back panel. If you don't set this to the off position in the middle, you won't be able to save anything.